Hello, welcome to Unlocking Buddhism. Have you ever noticed how happiness always seems just a step ahead? You laugh, you feel light, something good happens, and for a little while, everything feels exactly right. But then, almost without warning, it's gone. The feeling fades, the moment passes, and before you know it, you're searching again for the next little burst of joy, the next win, the next hug, the next reason to feel okay. And maybe you've wondered, why does it always slip away so fast? Is it just you? Is something wrong? Or is there something we've all misunderstood about what happiness really is? In this video, we're going to slow the world down for just a few minutes. We're going to look gently at some of the stories we've believed, about joy, about pain, about what it means to be okay. We're not here to chase happiness anymore. We're here to understand it. And maybe, somewhere in that understanding, we find something better, something quieter, something that doesn't run from us the moment we find it. If any part of this speaks to you, if even one sentence feels like a mirror, drop that word in the comments. What word are you carrying with you today? Maybe it's peace, maybe it's truth, maybe it's enough. Take a deep breath. Maybe you've had a moment like this. You wake up one morning and things feel light. Maybe you slept well for the first time in weeks. Maybe it's sunny and the air smells like the beginning of something good. You pour your coffee, you sit down, and for a moment, maybe a whole 5 seconds, there's nothing wrong. You smile, not because something amazing just happened, but because nothing's wrong. And that's rare enough to notice. That moment, right there, is what we've been taught to call happiness. Not the loud kind, not the over-the-top euphoria, but the quiet, this is okay kind. The kind you wish you could stretch a little longer. Freeze it maybe, save it for later, but of course you can't. Soon enough, a message pops up. A task reminds you it exists. A memory, a worry, or a habit you've rehearsed for years comes back, and the moment is gone, quietly, almost respectfully. It doesn't slam the door, it just leaves. And suddenly, you're thinking about how to get it back. There it is again. The movement, the reaching. And it's so subtle, so familiar, that we barely recognize it for what it is. A belief that happiness is something just beyond this moment. Something out there. Something we must organize the world around in order to feel. But here's the truth that lands only when you're really paying attention. That kind of happiness, the one that depends on circumstances, on how people treat you, on how well things are going, that happiness is conditional. It's real, but it's rented, and the lease is always short. Even the best things expire. You get the promotion, you celebrate, you take a photo, and the next day you wonder what's next. You fall in love. You feel high on life, and somewhere down the road, you start to fear losing what you found. Even joy becomes heavy when you start trying to protect it from change. And change always comes. We're not told that. We're told to chase, to want, to hold on. But we're rarely taught how to let go, how to sit with joy without gripping it, how to feel good without the need to stretch that feeling into forever. It's no wonder we suffer, not because happiness is fake, but because we try to make it permanent. But what if we stopped doing that? What if we learned to feel joy the way we feel a breeze? You don't catch it. You don't frame it. You just turn your face toward it while it lasts. And when it passes, you don't panic. You don't demand the wind return. You simply wait and breathe and stay present for whatever comes next. That kind of happiness isn't louder. It's not shinier, but it's wiser. It's not in the moment that went well. It's in your capacity to meet the next moment, whatever it is, with less fear, less expectation, and more space. That's where real peace begins. Not in the chase, but in the pause. Not in holding the good tighter, but in letting it touch you, then go, and realizing you're still whole. We carry an idea with us, often without noticing it. This belief that pleasure is the goal and pain is the enemy. It sounds simple, even obvious. Feel good things? Move closer. Feel bad things? Back away. And so, without ever needing to say it out loud, we organize our lives around avoiding discomfort and securing what makes us feel safe, warm, satisfied. But the longer you live, the more that equation starts to feel incomplete. You start to notice how quickly pleasure slips through your fingers, how often the moments that made you feel alive are followed by anxiety, fear, or letdown. You get what you wanted, and now you're afraid to lose it. You find peace, and now you're tense, hoping it lasts. The joy arrives, and right behind it, the shadow, pleasure and pain. You thought they were opposites, but now they look more like partners, each one shaping, chasing, and revealing the other. A rise, then a fall, a touch of sunlight, then a shadow on the wall, over and over again. And maybe for the first time, you stop asking how to make the pleasure last, and instead, start asking how to meet both sides, with softness, with presence, with less fear when the current changes, because it always does. But as we begin to observe more carefully, a strange truth starts to reveal itself. Pleasure doesn't always lead to peace, and pain isn't always the enemy we imagined. In fact, the two are often so intertwined that separating them becomes nearly impossible. We notice it in small things first. The joy of buying something new fades quickly into boredom or regret. The warmth of being close to someone can just as easily turn into fear of losing them. A moment of triumph is followed by the anxiety of maintaining that success. Even rest can become restlessness when we don't want it to end. It's like holding a snake that has two tails, one that feels soft, welcoming, familiar, and another that bites when you're least expecting it. We often think we're holding only the part we like, but sooner or later, we feel the sharpness on the other end. And yet, we keep going back, because the pleasure felt real. It felt good. It gave us a glimpse of something we longed for: ease, connection, relief. But what we didn't always see is that by clinging to that feeling, by insisting it stay the same, we unknowingly set ourselves up for suffering. The problem isn't that joy exists. The problem is believing it can be permanent, that we can freeze a moment in time and live inside it forever. But life isn't built that way. Every moment is part of a movement, a constant rising and falling, appearing and dissolving. What feels good now will change. What hurts today may soften tomorrow. And within this motion, both pleasure and pain are simply different waves on the same sea. To see this clearly is not to become cold or detached. It is to become free. Free from the demand that life always feel good. Free from the panic that arises when joy begins to fade. Free from the idea that one end of the snake is safe and the other is dangerous, when both are just different expressions of the same animal. And when we begin to relate to our experiences in this way, something remarkable happens. We stop chasing. We stop fighting. We begin to feel our lives more completely. Not just the highs, not just the comfort, but the fullness of the journey, with all its rise and fall. We see beauty in a smile, even knowing it will pass. We sit with discomfort, not because we enjoy it, but because we trust it won't last forever. And we begin to meet life not as a battlefield of opposites, but as a single thread weaving light and shadow into something whole. Pleasure, pain, beginning, ending. They are not separate stories. They are pages from the same book. And the more we learn to read with open eyes, the more we realize we were never meant to tear out the sad pages. We were meant to understand them, so we could finally hold the whole story. And then something simple happens. You're at peace. Nothing grand, nothing dramatic. Maybe you're sipping tea. Maybe you're sitting with someone you trust. Or maybe you're alone. But in that rare way where loneliness isn't heavy, it's soft, almost sacred. For a moment, everything feels exactly as it should. And without realizing it, your mind leans in. This is it, it whispers. Remember this. That's how it begins. Not with a decision, but with a desire. Not a loud one, just a quiet reaching. You don't want to leave that moment. You don't want it to change. And so you try to stretch it. You try to keep it. You recreate the setting. You revisit the memory. You chase the feeling, but no matter how softly you hold it, it moves. And the more you try to bring it back, the more you notice how far away it already is. That's the trap. Not the joy itself, but the belief that it should be permanent. That if you do everything right, it'll return and stay this time. But joy was never meant to be stored. It's not a possession. It's a passing light, a breath, a visitor. And the more we try to own it, the more we lose our ability to be with it at all. And almost without realizing it, you reach for more. You lean into the moment. You want it to stay. You want it again tomorrow, and the next day, and maybe forever. That's where the trap is set. Not in the pleasure itself, but in the movement toward possession. Because the moment you try to hold on to something that's already moving, you begin to suffer. The joy you were feeling starts to feel like a threat. Not because it changed, but because you feared that it would. And that fear, that grasping, is subtle. It's not loud or dramatic. It doesn't always look like desperation. Often, it's quiet. It shows up as a soft tension, an unease beneath the surface. A reluctance to let go of something good, even when it's already gone. This is the nature of craving, not just for things, but for feelings, states of mind, even for spiritual experiences. We don't just want to feel peaceful, we want to feel peaceful on demand. We don't just enjoy stillness, we want to reproduce it, guarantee it, make it part of our identity. But none of this is solid. The moment you try to turn experience into possession, you begin to suffer. Not because you're weak, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're asking impermanence to behave like permanence. And it won't. Pleasure, like everything else, moves. It rises when the right causes come together. It fades when those causes dissolve. It is not a gift we can lock away. It is a visitor, passing through, shaped by conditions beyond our control. When we forget this, we begin to live as collectors, gathering good moments, trying to protect them, recreate them, make them last longer than they naturally would. But what we often fail to see is that this collecting is never complete. There is always another high to chase, another feeling to preserve. And while the search can be thrilling, it is also exhausting. Because eventually, even the most beautiful experience stops satisfying. Even the most intense pleasure becomes dull when repeated. And what once brought joy can begin to feel like a burden, something we must have to feel okay, something we fear losing more than we actually enjoy having. The trap tightens when the mind begins to believe that the experience defines the self. I felt peaceful. I reached a moment of clarity. I touched joy. But you are not your experiences, and they are not yours to keep. You are the space they pass through. You are the awareness that holds them lightly, receives them with kindness, and lets them go without clinging, to enjoy without needing, to feel without attaching, to allow without controlling. That's where freedom begins. And in that freedom, you may find a deeper kind of joy, not because it stays longer, but because you no longer fear its passing. And yet, even as we start to let go, there's another movement beneath the surface, quieter, more seductive. It doesn't ask us to cling to real experiences. It invites us to live in imagined ones. The mind, when left unchecked, becomes an architect of escape. It builds perfect futures, replays idealized pasts, and constructs entire worlds where we're always right, always loved, always safe. And the more chaotic the present feels, the more tempting those imagined places become. It starts small. You daydream on the train. You rehearse conversations. You imagine a better version of yourself, more confident, more peaceful, more in control. In those moments, reality loosens its grip, and for a while that feels like relief. But slowly, the habit deepens, and without noticing, you start choosing the imagined over the actual. Not because you're weak, but because fantasy feels easier to manage than reality. And sometimes, we need that. Sometimes imagination is a kind of medicine, softening the edges of a hard day, offering comfort when reality feels too heavy to carry. But what begins as relief can quietly become avoidance. We start spending more time in imagined futures than in real moments. We rehearse conversations that never happen, picture outcomes we can't control, or daydream about versions of ourselves that feel more perfect than the person actually living this life. At first it feels harmless. After all, what's the danger in a little fantasy? But over time, something shifts. The more we escape into the mind's stories, the harder it becomes to accept what's real. The ordinary feels dull. The imperfect becomes intolerable. And slowly, without noticing, we begin to reject our own life. Not because it's broken, but because it doesn't match the polished image we've created in our head. And that rejection hurts. It creates a quiet, constant tension, a distance between the life we're living and the one we think we should be living. We stop being present. We stop being curious. We stop noticing the beauty that's actually here in favor of beauty we've imagined elsewhere. And it doesn't stop with dreams of success or comfort. Even our spiritual path can become fantasy. We picture ourselves enlightened, always calm, always wise. We imagine what it would feel like to be totally free. And in chasing that imagined version, we miss the real work. We miss the messy, unglamorous moments of practice, the pauses, the contradictions, the doubt, the discipline. We become more attached to the idea of being awake than to the practice of waking up. And the irony is that the more we idealize freedom, the more trapped we become, trapped in the very mind that promised to rescue us. This doesn't mean we must abandon hope or imagination. It means we must see them clearly for what they are. Tools, not truths. A good story can inspire, a vision can guide, but neither should replace our willingness to meet the moment as it is, raw, uncertain, unfiltered. Because the present may be flawed, it may be difficult, but it's also where every transformation begins. Not in a fantasy, not in a someday version of who we might become, but here, in this breath, in this imperfect now. And the more we return to this moment over and over with honesty and softness, the less we need to escape, the less we need a better story, because we've finally made peace with the one we're in. And somewhere along the way, without warning or ceremony, you notice a shift. Not outside, but within. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a clear thought or a dramatic realization. It's more like a quiet exhale. A sense that you've stopped fighting something, even if you can't name what it was. And in that pause, you find yourself standing in a new kind of space. Not because life is finally easy, not because everything is figured out, but because you're no longer pretending it needs to be. It's simpler than that. More quiet, almost invisible from the outside. You might be washing dishes, walking alone, or sitting in silence when it happens. A soft, internal breath where the chasing slows. And something in you begins to see. You see how long you've been trying to fix your experience, trying to edit, improve, control, protect, avoid, perfect. But in that stillness, the promises sound different. You start to realize they were just noise, well-meaning, but confused. Just another layer of effort covering something that was never broken to begin with. This is the shift. It doesn't arrive with answers. It arrives with honesty. You begin to see the patterns, not to judge them, but to recognize them. You notice the craving, the fear, the grasping for what feels good, the resistance to what doesn't. And instead of tightening, you soften. Instead of reacting, you breathe. Letting go, it turns out, isn't about becoming indifferent. It's not cold, passive, or resigned. Letting go is warm, intimate. It means trusting that life can be carried without being controlled. That the moment doesn't need to be held down to be held with presence. It means noticing when joy comes and letting it fill you without reaching for more. It means feeling sorrow rise and not running from it. It means being with what is, not because it's ideal, but because it's real. And reality, when finally met without filters, is sacred in its simplicity. This shift doesn't make you untouchable. It doesn't mean you'll never feel fear or doubt again. But it does mean those things stop defining you. They become weather. They pass through. And underneath, you remain steady, grounded, awake. You start to live with less drama, but more depth. With fewer highs, but more wholeness. With less need to prove, and more willingness to be. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all, You begin to sense a kind of joy that isn't waiting for conditions to be right. It's not loud or glowing. It's not dramatic. It's the joy of being aligned. The joy of no longer needing to chase or escape. The joy of seeing clearly and choosing presence anyway. That's when peace stops being a concept and starts becoming your natural rhythm. That's when the path, once complicated and full of tension, becomes simple again. Not easy, but clear. You're not trying to become anything now. You're simply remembering how to be. And in that remembering, you've already begun. And now, maybe you've noticed something. Not a sudden change, not a grand awakening, but a soft shift, a deeper breath, a quieter heart. You've seen how happiness comes and goes. You've felt the tug of craving, the weight of fantasy, the trap of clinging. And you've also touched something else, a different kind of peace, the kind that doesn't depend on perfect moments, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that stays, not because the world is finally calm, but because you are learning how to be calm within it. This isn't the end of the journey, but maybe it's the beginning of something more honest, more still, more real. So as you go back into your day, notice how you carry yourself. Notice where your mind runs, and when the old patterns return, as they surely will, meet them not with frustration, but with kindness. You're not here to fight yourself. You're here to see clearly, to walk gently, to remember what matters. And if you made it this far, tell me one word you're taking with you. Just one. Type it in the comments. Let it be your anchor, your reminder. Because sometimes, a single word, held with care, can change the way we move through the world. Thank you for being here.